Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, March 30th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will see a high near 60.2 degrees Fahrenheit, with temperatures dipping to a low of 51.9 degrees later tonight. Coming up on the show, we delve into the increasing tensions along the Israel-Lebanon border and why the existing ceasefire agreement is facing significant challenges. We will also explore the reasons compelling various states across the country to pursue their own bans on firearm conversion devices, separate from federal action. We've got the details on these important developments coming right up on Alex's News. We begin this morning with escalating tensions along the Israel-Lebanon border, where a fragile ceasefire seems to be fraying. Hezbollah has issued a stark warning to Israel. For more on this developing situation, we turn to news reporter Ethan. Ethan, what exactly is Hezbollah threatening? Grace, Hezbollah's deputy leader Naim Qassem, identified as Secretary General by some outlets like the Tribune Democrat, delivered a pretty blunt message yesterday, March 29th. According to reporting from CBS News and the Associated Press, Qassem stated that if Israeli attacks on Lebanese soil continue, and if the Lebanese government doesn't step in to stop them, Hezbollah will consider other alternatives. That's widely interpreted as a threat of renewed military action. And what prompted this specific warning now? Things seemed relatively quiet under the ceasefire. Relatively is the key word, Grace. This warning came directly after an Israeli airstrike hit Dahia, a southern suburb of Beirut known as a Hezbollah stronghold. CBS News and the Associated Press note this was the first strike on the Lebanese capital since the ceasefire began back in November 2024. Israel stated this strike was in response to rockets fired from Lebanon into Israel earlier, though the AP reports Hezbollah denies responsibility for that rocket fire. It seems Qassem's speech, originally planned for Jerusalem Day, was actually pushed back because of those Israeli strikes. So this ceasefire, brokered back in November, is clearly under strain. Remind us what the key terms of that agreement were. It was a significant deal, brokered primarily by the U.S., though Perplexity API also notes French involvement. It kicked off November 27, 2024. The main points, according to CBS News and the Associated Press, included a halt to fighting, a phased Israeli withdrawal from Lebanese territory south of the Blue Line A, that's the UN-recognized border demarcation A, within 60 days, and crucially, Hezbollah ending its armed presence south of the Litani River. The Litani River, that's a key geographical marker there, isn't it? Exactly. It runs through southern Lebanon, and historically, keeping Hezbollah forces north of the Litani has been a major goal for Israel and international resolutions, like UN Security Council Resolution 1701, mentioned by Perplexity API. The ceasefire agreement also called for the Lebanese Armed Forces, the LAF, to deploy in that southern area and disarm any unauthorized groups. So Hezbollah says it will retaliate if attacks continue. But are they holding up their end of the bargain regarding the Litani River? It seems the line in the sand, or rather the river, is a bit murky. That's the core of the dispute, Grace. Qassem insists Hezbollah has fully complied and ended its armed presence south of the Litani, as reported by CBS and AP. However, Perplexity API points out there's currently no independent verification, no public intelligence or satellite imagery confirming that withdrawal. On the flip side, Hezbollah accuses Israel of violating the deal through continued strikes and, according to the Tribune Democrat and Perplexity, by maintaining troops in 5 strategic border locations inside Lebanon, citing security concerns. Israel's military even claims, via Perplexity, they've struck dozens of Hezbollah fighters south of the Litani since the ceasefire began. So, conflicting stories on compliance. What's the bigger picture here? Why does Hezbollah think Israel is continuing these strikes? Qassem explicitly accused Israel, according to CBS News and the Associated Press, of using these actions to pressure Lebanon into normalizing relations, something Hezbollah strongly opposes. They're demanding a complete, unconditional Israeli withdrawal, as the Tribune Democrat reported. This all plays out against the backdrop of the wider conflict that flared up after the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, leading to intense cross-border fighting before the November ceasefire. Has there been any international reaction to this latest warning or any response from Israel? As of this morning, Perplexity API indicates no immediate official Israeli government response specifically to Qasem's March 29th warning. And thankfully, no new attacks were reported in the immediate aftermath. We know international bodies like the EU have previously called for de-escalation, but the situation remains incredibly volatile. A tense situation, indeed. Ethan, thank you for breaking that down for us. You're welcome, Grace. We're seeing a significant shift in state legislatures across the country focusing on a specific type of firearm modification. Here to break down this trend is our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, thanks for joining us. Happy to be here, Grace. So, reports from ABC News and Yahoo News indicate at least half the states now have laws targeting what are often called Glock switches. Can you explain exactly what these devices are? Absolutely. While they're often called Glock switches and frequently used with Glock pistols, these are actually small devices, sometimes called auto-sears, that can be attached to various semi-automatic firearms, not just Glocks. According to the Economic Times, they modify the firing mechanism, essentially turning a legal semi-automatic pistol or rifle into an illegal fully automatic machine gun. And that means firing multiple shots with just one pull of the trigger, correct? Exactly. Yahoo News notes they allow the weapon to fire continuously, emptying a magazine very rapidly. It's a dramatic increase in firepower, which is why law enforcement is so concerned. But aren't machine guns already illegal under federal law? What makes these devices different? That's a key point. Federal law, specifically the National Firearms Act, has long defined machine guns very broadly. As the Economic Times points out, this definition explicitly includes parts designed solely to convert a weapon into a machine gun. So, possessing one of these switches is federally illegal, basically the same as possessing an unregistered machine gun made after 1986. If they're already federally illegal, why the surge in state-level bans? And why are we seeing more of these devices pop up? It's a concerning trend. A TF data highlighted by the Economic Times shows a massive jump in recoveries from just over 800 between 2012 and 2016 to nearly 5,500 between 2017 and 2021. And Perplexity API notes over 12,000 were recovered in just under 3 years, ending in late 2024. A big factor, according to ABC News and others, is how easily they can be made illicitly, often using 3D printers, making them frighteningly accessible. So the states are stepping in to fill a perceived gap? Precisely. Proponents argue these state laws, like recent ones passed in Alabama and New Mexico reported by ABC News and the Economic Times, offer real advantages. Perplexity API suggests they empower state and local police to investigate and prosecute directly, using state resources, rather than relying solely on federal agencies. Alabama, for instance, made possession a felony with up to 10 years in prison after shootings linked to these devices. New Mexico also made it a felony. Does that mean state laws make it easier to prosecute? Potentially. Perplexity API mentions that some state laws might have different standards, perhaps not requiring prosecutors to prove the person knowingly possessed an illegal device, which can sometimes be a hurdle in federal cases. Plus, state laws raise public awareness. It adds another layer of enforcement. We hear a lot about gun control debates. What are the arguments surrounding these specific state bans? It sounds like a fully loaded issue. It definitely is, Grace. Gun control groups like Everytown strongly support these state bans and, as Yahoo News reports, are pushing for more, even suggesting holding manufacturers accountable if their designs are too easily converted. Several cities have reportedly sued Glock over this very issue, On the other side, the NRA, according to ABC News, argues existing federal laws are sufficient. And Gun Owners of America goes further, opposing state bans and, as reported by Yahoo News, arguing these devices can have legitimate uses and that bans infringe on Second Amendment rights. With half the states now having these laws, is there clear evidence they are making a bigger difference than the federal laws alone? That's the million-dollar question, and right now, the data is limited. Perplexity API indicates that while law enforcement in states like Alabama feels the state law helps them act faster, there aren't comprehensive studies yet proving significantly better outcomes, like lower recovery rates or violencia, solely because of the state law compared to states relying only on federal prohibition. The ease of 3D printing these devices complicates enforcement everywhere. It is a complex issue with technology outpacing regulation in some ways. Chloe, thank you for that detailed explanation and bringing us up to speed. You're welcome, Grace. Here are some other headlines. Iran has formally rejected direct negotiations with the United States regarding its nuclear program, responding to a letter from President Donald Trump. In a statement from President Masoud Pezeshkian, Tehran indicated that while direct talks are off the table, the door might remain open for indirect negotiations, although it's unclear if President Trump would accept that format. This comes as both the U.S. and Israel maintain they will not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, a stance underscored by Iran enriching uranium to near weapons-grade levels. Tensions have been high since Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 and imposed heavy sanctions, leading to Iranian retaliations. While Iran insists its program is peaceful, officials increasingly threaten pursuing nuclear weapons amid sanctions pressure and the collapse of the Gaza ceasefire. Trump's administration continues its maximum pressure campaign, and with the existing nuclear deal set to expire in October, there's urgency to negotiate a new agreement before potential UN sanctions snap back. Iran maintains that the lifting of U.S. sanctions is a prerequisite for any meaningful talks. President Trump stated he will not fire any staff members over the accidental leak of plans for an airstrike against Houthi targets in Yemen. In a March 29 interview, Trump dismissed the incident as related to, quote, fake news and witch hunts. The leak occurred March 13 when The Atlantic's editor was mistakenly added to a Signal group chat where officials, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth, discussed operational details for a planned March 15 strike. The Atlantic published the details on March 24, prompting criticism, with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries calling it reckless and demanding an investigation. Despite suggestions Waltz's job might be at risk, Trump asserted his confidence in his team, stating, "Nobody else makes that decision but me." The incident has raised concerns about using private messaging apps like Signal for sensitive government communications, potentially violating the Espionage and Federal Records Acts. A U.S. district judge has ordered the relevant messages be preserved. In Syria, a new 23-member transitional government was sworn in on Saturday, nearly 4 months after Bashar al-Assad's removal from power. Announced just before Eid al-Fitr, this government aims to guide the country through a 5-year transitional period toward peace. The cabinet includes diverse religious and ethnic backgrounds, featuring figures like Christian activist Hind Kabawat and former White Helmet's head Rayed Saleh. It will be led by a Secretary General, not a Prime Minister, with former interim head Mohammed al-Bashir serving as Energy Minister. While representatives from the U.S.-backed SDF are currently excluded, an agreement exists to integrate SDF forces into the Syrian army. The government's main goals are ending the war, restoring stability, tackling a severe economic crisis with 90% of Syrians in poverty, and persuading Western nations to lift sanctions. The U.S. State Department issued a warning about potential attacks in Damascus during the Eid holiday, shortly before the swearing-in. President Trump has reiterated his interest in the U.S. acquiring Greenland, citing national security concerns related to Chinese and Russian activity in the Arctic. In a recent interview, Trump refused to rule out using military force to achieve this, stating the U.S. cannot do without it, though he also suggested non-military options might exist. This stance has strained relations with Denmark, a NATO ally. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen criticized Trump's tone as uncomfortable, while affirming the U.S. as a close ally. Vice President J.D. Vance recently visited Greenland, focusing on the strategic Patuxent space base, though the trip was scaled back due to local opposition. Greenlanders and their lawmakers have formed coalitions opposing U.S. control, emphasizing cooperation over domination. The situation raises international concerns, potentially involving NATO if force is considered. Trump first floated purchasing Greenland during his previous term, following a devastating 7.7 magnitude earthquake near Mandalay, Myanmar, on March 28. Medical supplies are reported to be in desperately short supply, despite international aid flowing into the country. The quake, which occurred along the Sagang Fault, caused over 2,600 deaths in Myanmar, 17 in Thailand, injured thousands, and left hundreds missing, destroying critical infrastructure including hospitals. International assistance includes personnel, equipment, and funds from China, Hong Kong, India, Russia, Malaysia, South Korea, and the EU. However, relief efforts face major hurdles: a severe shortage of trauma kits, blood bags, and anesthetics, damaged roads hindering access to affected areas, and communication disruptions. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and the disaster exacerbates Myanmar's pre-existing humanitarian crisis stemming from ongoing conflict. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.